Hi, class. Welcome to this first lecture called Media Writing and Introduction and Discussion. Let's begin by discussing what we mean by the term mass media. This class is called Media Writing, but we're not going to talk about the media in its entirety. Broadly defined, as you can see here, it means all the information we receive electronically or in print. So it's easy to see how the mass media shape what we think and how we perceive the world. The exception to reception of information is, of course, when you speak directly with someone, which we do less and less of these days. For our class, we're going to focus on two areas. News, that's essentially what happened. And in a perfect world, it's just the facts. Although today, in today's world, sometimes the news is not as objective as we would like, as a political or ideological slant. Second, element we're going to discuss are public relations. Public relations is what I would like you to believe. That is shaping an image, and public relations is used a lot by government, it's used a lot by celebrities of all sorts, and by organizations. They try to create an image for you. It's a first cousin to advertising. And as I note here, it's not it's not part of the course. We're not going to discuss advertising in any detail, but it's worth mentioning to you because it's the most pervasive and often the most influential. Think of all the advertising that you're bombarded with and how it gets you to buy things. So this class is about knowing how to write for mass media, how to write for the media, and there's a specific way of doing that. Um, Before we go on any further, let me point out to you that this presentation will also be posted so you can go back and read it. The purpose of my lecturing on it is to draw your attention to the more important parts of it. So we're not going to be talking about broadcast. That's a different sort of writing. But we're going to talk about writing for online readers, which most of you, I assume, confidently will be doing. Um, in this kind of writing, we use the present tense. You can see an example here of, I'm sorry, we use a simple past tense and the present tense only when describing the present. But you'll find that 90% of the time you're writing about events that just happened, and so you use a simple past tense. Now, a lot of effective writing is rooted in psychology. What do I mean by that? It means you need to think about writing in a certain way. Think of it as something that is going to be helpful and not a task you just want to get accomplished. As I note here, if you do it in a haphazard fashion, you're going to write in a way that is ineffective. It's like talking. If you don't have an organized form of speaking, people will be lost as to what your main point is. So everything you write online is going to be there forever. You may think you delete things, but you've all read stories about people who have embarrassing tweets come up to the surface, or photos and the like. So one thing to think of is this: what you write is oftentimes how you are perceived. Knowing how to write properly, that is, not just throwing words together for a tweet or a text, is really important because you're not going to tweet or text about a job. Most likely you're going to have to write a cover letter, and when you work you're going to have to do memos and so forth. So knowing how to write properly online is vitally important. That's kind of the genesis of this class. As a note right here, until now, teachers have been paid to read what you write. When you graduate, as some of you already have, nobody's going to have to read what you write. And that's a sobering thought. So, um, writing effectively is, again, key to making you having your writing read. Think of your own self and all the stuff that you see online and how selective you are. And your writing is also going to be held to that criteria. Now, here's some general guidelines about effective writing. So you tell your readers what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them. So you're giving the bottom line. You give them a summary of what's to come. Let's say you are going to write about 10 fun things to do in Orange County. You say that at the beginning. There are 10 things that are really fun to do in Orange County, so that the reader knows in the first paragraph what's going to follow. You're going to talk about 10 things, and you do that. This is in contrast to traditional academic writing, where you have long introductions. We don't have introductions in media writing. We tell the reader the bottom line first, and that's a necessity driven by the online world. In your own case, when you get online, when you log in, sometimes or usually you have a limited amount of time, so you want to get to the point right away. Second point is to use only the words that are necessary. That doesn't mean you have to chop it up and make it very short, but think of being wordy. For example, a favorite expression I hear is, "I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to my birthday party." Now you can cut a lot of those words out and just say, "You're invited to my birthday party." If you do it all the way through, you will find your writing become tighter and more interesting. Don't use jargon. Jargon is language that's connected only to a certain profession, or euphemism. Euphemism is a polite way of saying something, or obscure words. What I would just note here that I hear all the time is that people pass away. That's a euphemism. That's a euphemism for somebody died. Say that somebody died, that they didn't pass away. Pass away is trying to cover up the fact that somebody died. And here I essentially repeat what I've just told you so you can read this at your leisure. Be as precise as possible. A long time ago, could be 5, 10, 50 years. Give some idea of how long you're talking about. Same thing as distance, height, and the like. Don't say it's very large or it's very tall or very wide. Now, media writing follows a template or format, if you will, and it's called the inverted pyramid. We'll have another discussion about this in another lecture or another posting. But the very first paragraph tells the reader everything he or she needs to know. What follows after that is more detailed but less important information. So here you go. Critical information must go at the beginning, and readers could stop reading at any time. That's the nature of the inverted pyramid. It's an efficient way of quickly and delivering information to readers, either in print or electronically. If you go online and spend some time scrolling, surfing the net, or scrutinizing what's online, you will find virtually everything is written in this format. So let's talk about the lead. And again, I'm scrolling through here because I'm only keen on things that are most important. The lead is the first paragraph of the story or press release. It should almost always address these questions: what, who, when, where, why, and sometimes how. So there are a few do's and don'ts. Do tell the reader the very most important fact in the first few words. Almost always it is the what. Do be specific, as we've talked about. We've already mentioned that you want to be specific and you want to use specific figures and terms. Use descriptive terms. If something is unprecedented, fiery, historic, use those terms. The lead is what hooks readers or repels readers. It's like a movie trailer. Gets you to go see the movie or decide that you don't want to see it. Don't bury the most important information by putting it at the end of the lead. Don't write empty leads that say almost nothing. For example, if you just say there was a meeting held or a game played and don't give any other details, that's an empty lead. Don't start by reporting where or when something happened. That's the least important. It belongs in the lead, but it belongs at the end. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to scroll really fast through here because I've already posted it, is the Associated Press style book. So I'm not going to go into it in any detail here except to uh, underscore this: names. You use the full name first, and you identify people by name. But if in the lead, if it's somebody who's unknown, you don't use the name, because if you said Jane Doe of Irvine, nobody knows who Jane Doe is, so you'd have to just say an Irvine woman. If it's Britney Spears, you would use Britney Spears because she is somebody who is well known, or any celebrity, any public figure. Titles and occupations. Unless there's a name attached to it, uh, let's say Jane Smith, president of Acme Incorporated, then you use or Acme Incorporated president James Smith, then you use uppercase. Podunk University president John Doe. Occupations are lowercase. And you see some examples here. So if you are a plumber, a lawyer, an engineer, that's lowercase. If you graduated from high school is lowercase unless you say graduated from Podunk High School. And here I won't go into all of this. You can do the addresses and attribution. It's rather tedious to talk about it. You need to know this. And again, the Associated Press style book in condensed form is posted. The word we like to use here is said. Those words that's the most neutral way of attributing information. So the lead should be no more than 35 words. You can go a little bit more than you want. A little more than 35 words if you want, by 1 or 2, 3 words at the most. Body paragraphs should be no more than 40 words. Now that sounds short, and it is, but let's review a story from the internet. You can see how it, in fact, is reflected. This is an old story, but it's still quite relevant. You can read the lead here. This is the dateline, which you won't be using. This is where the story originated, who wrote it, the Associated Press. And it tells you that the New York Yankees have signed a contract with a talented Japanese pitcher. It's just 18 words, and it tells you everything you need to know. Notice that the what comes first, and when, Wednesday, and there's other details. Now what follows are more details, but they're less important. Here it gives his age, that the Yankees had to pay $20 million, and it uh, gives some context of why they wanted to get this pitcher. And you have a quote. This quote expands on the previous paragraph. Quotes make stories livelier. They give them a color. And we'll scroll right through all this. You can read the story on your own and see uh, how well it fits the format of the inverted pyramid, and go back and review it and see and use it as a model if you'd like for how you're going to write your stories, with the exception of feature stories, which we'll talk about later in the uh, in this class. So what is news? Oftentimes it's obvious. If an airplane crashes in Orange County, if there's an accident in on the 5 freeway and people are killed, that's going to be a news story. Other events involving celebrities are less clearly news. It's really a judgment call. But there are certain elements that make news what it is. First one is timeliness. When did it, if it happened recently, that pushes it towards becoming news. Proximity. Something happens close to where you are. Somebody gets killed in a car accident in Irvine, that matters. But if that same person gets killed in a car accident in San Jose or San Francisco, unless they're famous, that's not going to be news. Relevance, how it affects, is it relevant to you? Importance is a judgment call. If the president decides to make some sort of a legal change, it may not be entirely relevant to you, but if it's judged to be important, it'll get in the news. Odd things that happen. Recently saw a story about a 17-foot boa constrictor caught in Florida. Turns out it was the largest boa constrictor ever captured in Florida, and that made it news. Not a big story, but something that people would want to read. Human interest are stories about people who are doing interesting, noteworthy, or fun or cool things. And they could be kind of random people, but they've done something to make them worthy of consideration. So, social media and fake news. Fake news is a term that's come into our vocabulary, and in a way of speaking, fake news really doesn't exist. News is by definition a factual account, but the term fake news has come to mean rumors or outright lies that are passed off as authentic news. And now that the internet is filled with all sorts of information, social media have fueled this phenomenon. How do you tell real from fake? There's no simple way, but there are some things that will tell you. First of all, I look at the sources of information. Are they authoritative? Have the mainstream picked up the stories? Is the website in question, does it have an obvious cause or political bias? Final thing I would say is learning to write effectively is a learned skill. Repetition, dedication, focus, and a strong desire are required to become a skilled and confident writer. Just as you learned to drive, for those of you that know how to drive, you learned it through a process of skills and steps that you repeated. You have to practice driving. If you've played a sport, played golf or tennis, you needed to practice and practice and practice to be able to hit the ball effectively in either of those sports. The other thing it's in this presentation, but let me talk about it so it's not a lie when I said it's the final. Another important thing is attribution. You have to attribute the information. That this is not a new concept to you. If you've written a research paper, you cite your source. Everything you don't know, you say according to or said police or said whoever the person was that said it. Well, with that, we wind up this very first lecture, and we'll have others to come, and we'll talk again online very soon. Thank you and take care.